Hello, welcome. Thanks for joining me. We have a lot of material to cover in light of tragic and recent events, which we'll discuss, namely the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So, the big question now is who killed Charlie Kirk? And I don't mean which person, which human. I mean, what drove it? What is the idea? What is the ideology behind it? That's really the ultimate question. And the word on the street is that the left is the one that killed him, right? Now, if you have ever watched some of my videos, you may know I have a couple of thoughts about the left that are not very orthodox, meaning non-mainstream. And to a great extent, that's what I want to talk about. I want to share with you some of my thoughts about what the left means, what the right means. They don't mean what you think they mean, is what I'm trying to tell you. And that's part of the grand mistake that almost everyone is making and they fall for. But before moving any further, let me just read to you the latest of what's going on with Tyler Robinson, the man who's accused of assassinating Charlie Kirk. So this is a pretty important piece of report, came out on PJ Media on September 14th, and I'm going to read it to you now, or excerpts of it. The left desperately wants to make Tyler Robinson just another unhinged loner, a broken young man pulled into the dark corners of the internet. But that narrative conveniently sidesteps the central fact investigators themselves are now focused on. Robinson's partner was transgender, and Robinson appeared to view Charlie Kirk's unapologetic defense of biological reality as hateful toward that partner. That detail matters, not just for understanding the motive, but for understanding how toxic identity politics has become in shaping violent outcomes. 6 separate sources familiar with the case said that Robinson's anger toward Kirk's views on gender identity could be key in establishing motive. Those same sources said Robinson lived with a romantic partner who was undergoing a gender transition, a fact Utah Governor Spencer Cox confirmed on Meet the Press Sunday morning. For obvious reasons, investigators originally wanted to keep that information under wraps. The roommate has been fully cooperative with law enforcement, unlike Robinson, who refuses to confess to the killing. But there's no escaping the reality. This wasn't some random act of violence. Robinson targeted Kirk, and the link between Kirk's outspoken positions on gender ideology and Robinson's romantic ties to someone transitioning is glaring. Now, this report and others go into this sort of business about furries, which I only a day or two became aware of. There's apparently some sort of subculture called furries where people dress up like animals, and I believe it has a sexual erotic aspect to it. The bottom line is you get the picture, what this is all about, okay? So now moving that aside, let us, after the Charlie Kirk assassination occurred, I think was it last Wednesday? A lot of people here on YouTube, in fact, made comments and were referenced an older video I did. And they said it was very prophetic, it was very applicable, it was very prescient, it really hit the nail on the head, to which I'm grateful that they thought that. But on watching it, I agreed. I thought, yeah, you know what? I was basically summarizing what we're dealing with now. And to that end, I'm going to play it, a shortened version. The whole thing is not very long, but it's about, what I'm going to play is about 4 minutes. And it's important because after you watch it, the rest of this is going to be an unpacking of a lot of what I say, which is going to strike a lot of people as extremely controversial, etc. So without further ado,
we don't even realize we're doing it. Let's talk about one of the most dangerous habits on our side. Something so subtle, we don't even realize we're doing it. It's the casual, constant use of the term the left. Now, I get it. It feels like convenient shorthand, left versus right, liberals versus conservatives, that old political spectrum we've all been taught to believe in. But here's the thing, that spectrum is a complete lie. It's not just false, it's a trap. It forces us to frame every issue as if we're just choosing between 2 flavors of opinion. As if truth and falsehood, order and chaos, good and evil are just personal preferences. And that's exactly how the madness spreads. By calling it the left, we make it sound like it's just a different viewpoint. Legitimate, respectable, maybe even worth considering. It's not. It's wrong. It's insane. And in many cases, it's pure evil. Let me give you an example. A man says he's a woman. He demands access to women's bathrooms, women's prisons, women's sports. He insists that you affirm his delusion or be punished. Is this just the left? No, it's a big fat lie. And when you call it leftist, you give it structure, you give it standing, you turn insanity into ideology. You let it sit at the table as if it deserves to be there. It doesn't. It belongs outside with the rest of the trash. Here's the real danger. Once you buy into the left versus right dichotomy, you stop judging things by whether they're true and start judging them by where they land on the line. Oh, I guess drag queens reading to kids is just something on the left. Wrong. It's not left. It's predatory. The language currently being employed flattens the moral universe. It takes objective eternal truths and makes them sound like opinions. It turns perversion into expression, blasphemy into progress, and delusion into identity. This isn't just semantics, it's warfare, linguistic warfare. And the left, yes, that's what they also call themselves, understands it perfectly. They've spent decades reprogramming language, redefining words like man, woman, marriage, freedom, justice, even reality itself. And now the right is playing along. They say gender-affirming care, we say trans surgery. They say choice, we say abortion. They say minor attracted persons, and we still call them progressive. Why? Could it be because we're afraid to call it what it is? Evil? Because we think calling it left is safer, more polite? But that's not just weak, it's collaboration. If we're serious about defending truth, we have to stop pretending this is about politics. This is not left versus right. This is truth versus falsehood. Sanity versus delusion. Yes, light versus darkness. And here's the thing. This didn't used to be political at all. Even atheists used to believe in facts. Even liberals used to know what a woman was. But now they've thrown out truth entirely. It's not just there is no God, it's there's no reality. And we're still out here talking about the political spectrum, still pretending that people who think they're the opposite gender are just far left, still acting like this is a policy disagreement. No, this is a war, a spiritual war. There is no middle ground between truth and falsehood. There is no compromise between male and female. There is no neutral position when children are being mutilated, when lies are being codified, when evil is being paraded through the streets like a virtue. So stop calling it the left. Stop giving this madness the dignity of ideology. Stop giving it a place at the table. It's not leftist to say men can breastfeed. It's not leftist to say kids can change sex. It's not leftist to teach porn in schools. It's insanity. It's perversion. It's war against reality. And when you call it left, you help it hide. Instead, call it what it is. Call it evil. Call it confusion. Call it rebellion, cowardice, or madness. But don't call it just the other side. Because the truth is not one end of a spectrum. The truth is a rock, unmoving, unchanging. And everything else is either built on it or shattered by it. So speak like it, fight like it, and stop giving ground, especially with your words. Because in the end, this isn't about politics. It's about truth. And there is no left or right when it comes to truth. There is only right or wrong.
All right. Thanks, Dose. I have Dose in the background helping me out here. All right. There it is. I think we can wrap it up. Any questions? Actually, I will be taking super chats and possibly other questions towards the end. But so, yeah, that is my point. And as you can see, that's very much different than what is being paraded nowadays as to what left and right means, including by the right. This is actually what irks me. It's not that the left call themselves the left. It's that the right calls them the left. All right. So let me unpack a little bit of what I just said, give you some more details, a little more concrete examples, and to really underscore how bad this whole situation is. So amongst everyone in America, there seems to be an implicit understanding as to what the left and right mean. Okay. Imagine a linear line, right? And you have the middle, and you have my right is this and left is this side, and you have in the middle, right? And what does left mean? What does right mean? Well, what are they left and right of? They're actually left and right of the middle. So what is the middle? If you're talking about, and we increasingly are, we're talking about morality and cultural issues. The middle means sort of like a neutral ground. This is where people who apparently don't have any ideas, they're not for or against anything, are, right? Which is why there's very few people who ever define themselves as in the middle. Okay. And then on the right, you have people who are ideologically conservative, right? No pun. the further you go on the right. And on the left, you have people who are ideologically liberal, right? So this is the idea that I think everyone, whether they've thought it out the way I just explained it or not, that's kind of what operates in everyone's head. And when you do that, and we all do, what happens is, guess what? Everything becomes legitimate. So the first thing you have to understand about this paradigm is it implicitly denies truth. Okay. All right. This paradigm, as I described it to you, as most people, one way or another, kind of agree to it or understand it that way, is inherently anti-truth because it claims that the neutral ground, okay, is the neutral ground, which has no belief. It's actually not neutral. It's nihilistic. Okay. It believes in nothing. Nihilism means nothing, right? And if you can go one way or the other, and they're both equally legitimate, and so they are, that's why they're on the political spectrum, then obviously there's no truths, because the guy who's on the right and the far right believes something that's quite the antithesis of the guy on the left and the far left, right? And who has the truth? Well, obviously there's no truth. That's why they're both allowed, and they can both talk, and they can both debate, right? So that is, I would argue, how people get it, and that's the problem, all right, as I alluded to in that little short video, because trans, that whole thing, man saying I'm a woman, yeah, that's not a political position, right? That is an abnegation of truth and common sense and science and biology, all right? It doesn't belong on a political spectrum. But when you say it's left, you've just validated it. You've just legitimized it. You've said it belongs in the spectrum. It's one of those, it's a debating point. It's something we can argue when it shouldn't be argued, because it's, again, nonsense. It belongs somewhere else. Now, let me give you my understanding of how this political spectrum really works. Okay. The ultra right, right? The people who are called ultra right, those horrible people, they are actually normal people, commonsensical people who want what everyone else in this world outside the West wants, who believe in the same common, traditional things, marriage, morality. They believe in their God, their religion in the West, Christianity, and they want borders, and they want law, and they want order. That is what an ultra-right person really is, okay? And the proof of that is, take a look around the world. Okay, you leave the West, everyone in any country, you want to go into the Muslim world, the Hindu world, East Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, everyone would be considered what we call today ultra-right. Okay, they are proud of their heritage, they're proud of their nation. They want to, you think you're going to go and tell those people to suppress their religion and to accommodate, some minority or whatever, religious minority? You think any of those people would respect that? No. You think you're going to go and tell them to, completely change everything they believe and their traditions and their rules just to accommodate one? No, they don't do that. So the bottom line is, so-called ultra-right people in the United States, they are just the most commonsensical, normative people that actually would see eye to eye with the rest of the world. Okay. Now, what happens now when you start moving west? I'm sorry, west. Well, yeah, actually, figuratively speaking, true. But when you start moving left of the ultra right, even if you're still within the right, okay, now you start becoming leftist. Now you start leaving truth, because you're making accommodations and you're now no longer adhering to truth. And I'm going to talk a little more about what I mean by truth. It's not even necessarily a religious thing. I'm not saying, oh, I have my Bible and it's absolutely true. A lot of the truths that I'm going to talk about are actually based on science and common sense. All right. So keep that in mind, and we'll get into it. And if I forget, you can ask me and we'll talk about it. But in as much as you veer left of the ultra right, yeah, you become infected with this sort of abnegation of truth and subjectivity, which is now anything goes. It's your opinion. Who's to say, this? Who's to say that? So, in my opinion, a moderate Republican or a moderate right-wing person, or even a centrist, of course, they are liberals. Okay, totally, they are complete liberals. Now, the center, the neutral ones, as I mentioned to you, they are the nihilists. Okay, so to be a pure centrist is to be a nihilist. Nihilist comes from the Latin word nihil, means nothing. Okay, and then philosophically means the belief in nothingness, right? Nothing matters. There's no truth. It's the exact opposite of believing in truth. So if you're in the center, you're just a nihilist. You don't necessarily believe in anything. Now, as you go left of the center, now you enter to the true left spectrum. This is where insanity begins. All right. Nihilism gives way to madness, because now you're not just saying, I don't believe in any truth. You are putting falsehoods in place of truisms and believing them and living according to them. And yeah, that leads to a little madness, believe it or not. All right. Um, so, for example, as I had mentioned in that video, being a man who insists on being called a woman, I'm sorry, that is, again, whether you want to look at it from a religious paradigm or a secular scientific paradigm, that's loony. Okay, from a religious paradigm, from a Christian point of view, a man who says I'm a woman, or a man or a woman who insists on forcing people to call them by plural pronouns, they. Okay, that strikes me more of like demonic possession, right? I mean, in the Bible, in the New Testament, who's they? It's Legion. Remember the demon man, the demon possessed man who comes to Christ and he says, what's your name? And he says, I am Legion, for we are many. So if you want me to call you they, and I'm looking at one singular organism standing in front of me, that tells me a lot about you from a religious perspective. But if you want to even address it just from a secular scientific point of view, yeah, you're a man. Okay. Biology says you're a man. All right. So now for you to come and tell me I'm a woman and I need to go play sports with women and I need to use female bathrooms, et cetera, that is not something that should be seen from the ultra right point of view, which is simply the commonsensical, sane point of view, which is that this is not to be debated. This is not to be, accommodated. Okay. This person, again, you want to, from a religious or a secular perspective, either needs a priest or he needs a psychiatrist. Okay. What he doesn't need is validation and having his point of view celebrated and and turned into normalized. Okay. And that's kind of the situation we're in right now. If you look around you, that's what's happening. So let me now. Okay. So that's the sum of it all. That's what's going on. And I'm going to tie it back to Charlie Kirk, but I think you can already see where this is going. The people who, reject truth, who want to live according to, the thing is, keep in mind when people say, oh, that's a sin, right? You shouldn't do sins. Sins are bad. Unfortunately, too many people, religious people, I think in their mind, the connotation or the idea is God is against it, but somehow it's fun and it's actually good, but God just doesn't want me to do it. The reality is sin harms you first and foremost. And what is sin? The Greek word hamartania, you know what it means? It means to miss the mark. Okay. It's a guy shooting an arrow and he misses the mark. So sin is to veer off what is natural and what is good. And when you do that, you are the first to suffer. Okay. So this is why it grieves me to see all these people. And instead of warning them, instead of talking them back to reason, we pat them on the back and we celebrate them and we tell them to keep it up. That's great. Keep living that lifestyle. And that lifestyle is killing them on the inside. And it's killing us too, as a byproduct. And as we just saw. Okay. So keep that in mind and we'll get into it. But to further underscore what I've been talking about, let's delve into a little U.S. history, which I seldom do. Normally I talk about, Islamic history or crusades and so forth. But to really explain to you what we're talking about here in the United States, left and right, that term is pretty old. I believe it goes to the French Revolution. All right. But it didn't mean what they want you to think it means today, which is that implied spectrum that I told you was just nonsense. It meant something completely different. And more often than not, it was tied to, even in the United States, especially before the 60s, being left or right was about fiscal policy. It was about economics. It was about how much you want the government to interfere in regulating, again, especially economics. So think about it. If you went back, let's say before the 60s, all right, and before the so-called sexual revolution, everyone in this country, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, was what you would call today ultra-right because they were normal people like the other peoples of the world, as I mentioned. Okay, think about that. If you were a Democrat and you were a liberal and you were living in 1950s, okay, the stuff we're talking about, forget about that. Even just normal stuff. Just homosexuality was completely anathema in the 50s. All right. There's videos out there I was watching them on NPR where Californian school officials in the 50s and 60s warned children against homosexuality, which they call a sickness of the mind. And that's in the 50s in California. All right. So something clearly has changed, right? But and it's always going under euphemism. So really, the war on truth, which began in the 60s and the so-called sexual revolution, it always masquerades under a cloak of tolerance, humanism, open-mindedness, enlightenment, freedom. These are all euphemisms that are always used in connection with these new ideas that are just the complete opposite of reality and what people historically, including in the United States, would have ever tolerated or dealt with. Okay. And so, as I was mentioning, in the 60s, right? Even let's put it this way: if you were a Democrat or a liberal in the 1950s, the idea of a regular homosexuality, okay, and let's say man on man, two regular men in suits and ties who don't act crazy or weird and are not furries, okay, and you were a Democrat and liberal in the 50s, that would have been more shocking, okay, more something to be rejected for that liberal Democrat than for the ultra right wing today, how they feel towards this, the crazy trans stuff. So that's how far we've come along. All right. And again, keep in mind, this wasn't about left and right. This is something new. They've injected this idea. They've made you think that the left, right, which is true, it does exist. Again, you can be liberal, fiscally liberal. You can be conservative, fiscally conservative. These are real paradigms, but they injected all these moral and sexual things into them, implying that that too is part of the spectrum. Not that that is actually fixed at birth and through common sense and through law and order. Okay. And people fell for it. Okay. So with the 60s and with that whole revolution, it all really came to roost. So now, you know, where it took decades to accept just regular homosexuality, you know, like I said, in the 60s or 70s, just being a gay man, as it's called. Speaking of euphemisms, there's a good one, right? Gay. I've always been wondering what, you know, okay, you're a homosexual, I'm a heterosexual. What about that makes you happy and joyous and merry? Okay, so my point is a lot of euphemisms are involved here and people unfortunately fall for them, just like the left. Something else masquerades behind these words that usually sound nice. All right. But once truth was abandoned and once we said, okay, homosexuality is okay, right? Man on man. Once you said that, is it any wonder where we are where we are? How can you legitimately say homosexuality is okay, but transgenderism and being a furry and all that other stuff is wrong? Why? On what grounds? You've already said a man and a man can do that, right? So why not the rest? It's a natural progression, right? Progressive. There's a reason for that word because it's built on the former. So you can't, and that's one of the sort of logical incongruities that most people don't understand. Once you say this, yes to that, well, you've lost that. And this reminds me of, if you recall, there was this, which I always thought was kind of ludicrous. I sympathized with them, but they didn't seem to see what this was about. I'm talking about Christians, especially back in the 2000s. And if you recall, there was this big thing about, I don't mind if homosexuals marry civil marriage, but you can't marry in a church. Okay. I'm sorry, but while I sympathize and I agree with you, you've already lost the battle. Once you said civil marriage is okay, but not the church, you just lost the battle. That's actually the bigger issue, really. Okay. I mean, there's all kinds of denominations anyway, so it's not like God actually cares about the state as well, more so, arguably. So that is a perfect example of how conservatives tend to lose sight of the forest for the trees, which happens often and by design, of course. So anyway, you fast forward to where we are decades later. What has been happening? Okay, look at what happens to children in this country. They're born, and who's their teachers? Well, they're real teachers. Okay, a lot of them who are the left. Okay, and the television, right? That's what they grow up on, or I call it television, but you know, now it's social media, it's whatever, the internet. It's just a screen that they look at and get hypnotized by, and all of it represents and advocates and disseminates what we call the left. That is to say, it disseminates and promotes madness and insanity. Okay. And this has been going on decade for decade. So are you really surprised at what's happening? How can any of us really sit back and be surprised at what happened to Charlie Kirk and what happens all the time now? You know, Charlie Kirk is definitely not an aberration. Assassinations, killing someone because you don't like what they say or what they think, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that's becoming a very common theme, right? Are you really surprised that there's a lot of crazy people in this world that you called the left, and therefore you implicitly legitimize. And I know a lot of you will say, well, to me, the left means evil. The left means crazy. The left means stupid. I get it. I understand what you're saying. But my point is, when we use that spectrum, okay, it immediately legitimizes it. Instead of saying, no, this is just sick behavior, I'm not even going to give it a political label. Leftism is a political label, right? Instead of doing that, we call them left, and again, that's part of that construct. You've just accepted the construct, and it just because it's left, you can say I hate it, I don't like it, it's wrong, but it's still it's something you have to debate, something you've legitimized, and therefore you have to address. Okay, whereas sane people historically and sane people all throughout outside the West are not going to debate this because there's nothing to debate, because they're governed by reality and common sense and decency and science and biology. Okay, and that's how addled we've become. We're not. That's too hard for us to. I mean, when I watch, I was watching some hearing, unfortunately, of some woman who's supposed to be a doctor or something, and they were asking her to define a woman, and she couldn't. Are you kidding me? I mean, bring me a child from the most impoverished third world nation. That guy's going to have way more common sense than that woman. But she's representative of so many people in the US, right? We can't say what a woman is. Are you serious? This is the brain rot has reached this level, and these are the people who are in power and positions of influence. Is it any wonder this country's falling apart? I mean, it's time for people to really wake up. Now, I will wax a little more philosophical on these topics, but I want to interject and bring in something else because I think it's very helpful. My field, Islam. I want to show you how very relevant it is to this entire discussion and how to better understand it. Specifically, a lot of you've noticed throughout the years, there's an alliance, right, between Islam and the left, right? And again, if you go by the original definition, it kind of never made sense, did it? Because the left is supposed to be liberal and open-minded and enlightened, and they believe in sexual promiscuity, and Islam is the exact opposite, right? No enlightenment, draconian, sexual conservatism, etc. So why were they always friends? Well, if you strip away what we're talking about, which is stop thinking of the left as liberal or part of a political continuum, you'll find out that in reality, what they are is they are both sides who represent a falsehood, okay? And that's what makes them natural allies against the truth, which is represented by common sense, decency, and morality. Again, AKA the ultra right. And I hate using that word because I know it has connotations, political connotations, and I'm trying to rise above that, okay? And so, by the way, I'm not here to argue that Republicans are good and Democrats are bad. I'm not doing that. I think the Republicans are very much compromised. Remember what I said? Once you leave the ultra conservative camp, you're already a liberal or you're a leftist. Okay, you're just not as bad as the right. Okay, I'm sorry, as the left. But you're all in the same camp. That's why I've always said, to me, Republicans and Democrats are two faces of one coin. And if you can't see that, well, you've fallen for the trick. It's another one of those tricks that have permeated society. At any rate, so anyway, I'm not here to make an argument about, oh, the Republicans are always right and the Democrats are always wrong. No, I'm not arguing that. But I am saying that, of course, the person who identifies with the left tends to be a Democrat, right? And we've already seen what the left means. The left is veering off past nihilism and now creating ideologies that actually contradict full-on reality. So obviously, yes, to be a Democrat is to be much worse into it. But to be a Republican also is not a whole lot better, is what I'm trying to tell you. And that's why it's so much better to transcend these false dichotomies and really see things the way they really are, as the way I'm trying to explain it to you. Okay, you just have people who are called ultra-right. These are normal people, okay? Just like throughout history and in the modern era, they want what everyone else wants, and which is considered absolutely natural and normal and healthy, okay? But because they're in the United States and there's a war, they're demonized as ultra-right evil. Ultra-right means you're racist. Ultra-right means you're whatever. All the words that they hurl at them that are meant to shut you up, right? Like Islamophobic, etc. So anyway, that was a tangent. Back to Islam. So the reason I believe that Islam and the left, and look, yeah, I'm using it too, right? Until such time comes where we can actually coin a more accurate word or words. Yeah, I tend to use it with quotation marks to say, you know, I'm using it reservedly just to make my point so you understand what I'm saying, which is important. But the reason that the left and Islam are natural allies, they actually hate each other and have nothing but sheer contempt, especially Islam for the left. But they use each other because they're both, they both represent one side of a falsehood, one side of a lie, and they're fighting against truth. All right. So that's why they use it. To its credit, however, I would say Islam is a little better. Islam at least believes in truisms. You're not going to find this gender insanity in the Islamic world. Okay, that's one thing. So to their credit. So my point is, yeah, but of course, Islam is fundamentally false. It's built on a false message. It's built on a God who says women are chattel and you can enslave women and copulate with them because they're the wrong belief, and you can rob and plunder and kill people because they're the wrong belief. Okay, so yeah, there's a problem there too. Okay, and what's interesting is what you'll see, which really the ultimate commonality between the so-called left and Islam is because they're both built on a lie. They both, Islam and the left, are unable to debate and cannot tolerate criticism. Okay, so you just saw what happened to Charlie Kirk. That happened because the trans person or whatever that guy is who's involved in that sort of thing can't defeat a guy like Kirk debating about sexuality. Okay, and it's not because Charlie Kirk is a genius. It's because Charlie Kirk is aligned with the truth. So there's no winning. Okay, now to be sure, both Islamists and leftists are willing to debate as long as they can lie and twist and mangle things and possibly win, and they do amongst our weaker brethren who don't see the reality. But if you take a top-notch lawyer who's representing a falsehood and a top-notch lawyer who's representing the truth, the latter will always win. The guy representing the truth will definitely always win. Okay, so that's why when it comes to debates, both Muslims and leftists do the same thing. All right, and I'll just give you some examples. And then, so before it became common knowledge here in the West, and before you had like these trans people going on killing sprees, and I know this happens a lot. Wasn't there one recently, I think a Catholic church, and they just killed children, and there was others before it. But before that became very common, it was very common for Muslim radicals to go and kill whoever, Christians, infidels, other Muslims who apostatized, because they're not capable of debating. Okay, and I've seen this a lot, and I followed it a lot, especially in Arabic programming, but especially in sub-Saharan Africa. I think in Uganda, because it has sort of a large Muslim population living side by side with Christians. I have come across like every week almost, or every other week, where Muslims rise up and kill an evangelist after a debate. Okay, because I guess because they're not capable of winning, so they fight and they kill and they make threats and they get outraged and they get triggered, as the word goes. Trigger, by the way, that's every every charlatan's last refuge. Okay, I don't know I can't debate, so I'm gonna pretend that what you said is so crazy that I'm shaking and foaming at the mouth. I'm not even able to respond. No, you're an idiot and you have nothing to say because you're on the side of falsehood. So that's the truth. That's what triggering is, by the way. Keep that in mind. So anyway, the Muslims killing and doing what they've been doing, that's for anyone who goes against them. Yeah, there's a reason for that. Okay, because in debates, if you talk about God, let's say a Christian Muslim debate, and the Christian represents the God of the Bible, of the New Testament specifically, and the Muslim, and then he asks the Muslim, well, your God is all about enslaving women and killing and plundering and conquering and the jizya. All right, so if you're a non-Muslim and you're conquered, you're allowed to pay tribute. It's called jizya, and this is it's in the Quran 9:29. Fight the people of the book until they pay tribute and feel themselves subdued, unless they convert to Islam, right? And I was thinking the other day, I remember I even wrote about it once. Emperor Emmanuel II, who is a Byzantine emperor, I think he was 10, 20 years before Constantinople was conquered by the Turks. He was at one point, he was a hostage of the Turks because they were already attacking Constantinople at that time. And he would engage in religious debates. And he made a really amazing point that very few people mention now about the jizya. And he said, why would your God, if he's a real God, why would he even allow man to live in sin, which is being an infidel, by paying money. What does your God care about that? It just shows you again, the very human origins of Islam. I don't think God is gonna be happy. Oh well, I'll allow you to live as an infidel, an evildoer, as long as you give me some money. So this is my point. My point is, in Islam, just as in the left, there's a lot of leaky holes that are easily exposed. And so rather than debate, rather than protect the religion verbally in a debate, they go on killing sprees and they get violent. Blasphemers, apostates, anyone who says anything that bothers anyone. Okay, and indeed, to really underscore this, on the very same day that Charlie Kirk was killed, an Iraqi Christian man in France was stabbed in the neck and killed by Muslims. Let me read to you quickly the report. It's a very quick summary. Ashur Sarneya, a 45-year-old Assyrian Christian from Iraq who used a wheelchair, he was handicapped, was stabbed to death outside his apartment in Lyon, France, on the evening of September 10, when Charlie Kirk was bled out of his neck. While live streaming a video about his faith on TikTok, the Assyrian Christian was killed. Sarnia had fled Iraq in 2014 to escape Islamic persecution and had lived quietly with his sister for over a decade. Witnesses reported that the attacker appeared to be waiting for him and struck him in the neck before fleeing. Emergency services were unable to revive him. Sarnia was known for sharing Christian messages in Arabic online and had previously reported being harassed and attacked by Muslim users. His sister stated that, quote, he had no enemies, no problems with anyone. Just like Charlie Kirk, except for a few lunatics, right? Who are not quite as few as we'd like to think. That's the problem. So there you have it. There's the left and there's Islam. The two groups that you can begin to imagine how they're in the same bed. Well, they're in the same bed because they both can't tolerate criticism. They both can't handle debates because they're both on the wrong side and they are representing falsehoods vis-a-vis truth. Okay. And this now, to really bring it home, this issue of debates and, again, to show you how multi-tentacled all this is and how it manifests itself in ways that you would think are not, relevant to the particular case at hand. A guy like me who talks about Islam and writes about Islam, I have been the brunt of these sorts of attacks to silence me and to censor me for a long, long time. Okay. I've been involved in this since 2005, 20 years. And I'm going to show you some of the reports, but one of the most famous, actually, to give you an example of how bad the inability to actually to debate, okay, amongst Muslims, amongst leftists, how it is. Back in 2018, the U.S. Army War College invited me to give a lecture about my book, Sword and Scimitar, the subtitle 14 Centuries of War Between Islam and the West. I was invited and they were looking forward to it. Apparently one of their higher ups read it, loved it, and just wanted me to come and talk about it. Everything was fine. Everything was set. And everything was finalized like months ahead. But then when the date came, like 3 days earlier, they wrote to me an email saying, "Oh, we have to cancel." And long story short, I found out that CARE, okay, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and a number of so-called leftist groups that are allied with CARE were just attacking the War College for inviting me in the first place. Okay, as we do that, I'm gonna put up. Those can help me put up some. Not that one. That's an old one. That's from 2011. But the War College ones. This goes on for a while. So anyway, in 2018, after that happened and CARE did what they did, and they actually rescinded the invitation to me. And but what was it about? All I was going to do was talk about history. Okay, so think about that. I was going to summarize history, and I was invited to do that. And CARE and all them, I have their letters and all their attacks and all their screeds. Okay, they didn't once show something I wrote that was wrong. They didn't say, "Oh, look, Raymond Ibrahim in this page made this statement, which is false." It was nothing like that at all. It was all, "I'm an Islamophobe, I'm a racist, and the War College is a racist. Me, the Egyptian guy, was a racist, and I'm a white supremacist." Literally, these were words that were used on me and the U.S. Army College, and it got extremely hysterical, and that's why they actually That's why the War College disinvited me after going out of the way to invite me. Now, what happened is, it was funny. This was actually a good news kind of thing, because what happened after that is the word got out, and a lot of people found out, and a lot of people came in my defense. Among them, there's something. There was the National Association of Scholars, and these are a bunch of academics, and they drafted a letter which was sent to Donald Trump. He was president at the time, and it has something like 500-600. You could probably find it there, Dose. 500-600 signatures by academics. So that's actually that was comforting, and a reminder that not all of academia is compromised. But they basically said this is about free speech. This is a guy talking about history, and you can't just and keep in mind, this is the War College. This is supposed to be a pretty pretty tough, military minded, no nonsense institution, and it did that. So you can imagine your average college, how they respond. And also I had 10 Republican congressmen. I met with various of them, and they signed a letter and sent it, a very angry letter, to the War College. Okay. And long story short, the War College reinvited me back. Okay. And CARE and their leftist allies again went crazy and started trying to, get it canceled. This time it didn't. And it was, according to one of them, when I finally gave that talk, it was one of the, they said the most attended event they had since a Buzz Aldrin. I mean, it was packed. To which I say thank you, CARE and leftist allies, because you did a whole lot of free publicity for me, and everyone sure wanted to see what this was about. Okay, so that's just one example of that. But this goes way back with me. So in 2011, that first image you saw, I was invited at a college, Everett College in Washington State. And I was a lot younger in 2011, pretty naive. How old was I? I was in my 30s. And I was like, okay, I'll give a talk. And I went up there, and immediately there was all these news people and media and asking me, why do you hate Muslims? And tell me what it is, et cetera, et cetera. And then, I gave the talk. The college, to their credit, they didn't cancel. And I gave the talk, and it was packed. Okay. And it's Washington State, and it was packed with, if I look at them, Washington State's mostly white people, right? And mostly students. But there was 2 Muslims there, one woman dressed in a hijab or a full-on black burqa, okay, and one Muslim man. And if you can see right there what you're seeing, there's the Muslim man, and if you scroll down, you'll see the woman in the burqa. These were the people basically who were that were given all the weight to respond and say what they thought, not the 500 Washington State American students who all said they benefited from it and they thought this was a edifying lecture, okay. And and the whole thing again was that college was racist. I'm evil. So my point in telling you all this once again is there's truth and there's falsehood. Okay. And those who align with falsehood are not able to debate. They can't, because they will be exposed. Okay. So this is why they create words to shut you down. Islamophobe as one of them, racist as another. Okay. Xenophobe, ultra right. Okay. So now the word that I think actually captures normalcy best is a stigma. You don't want to be part of that. Okay. And it's both Muslims and it's both leftists and it's other. I mean, there's other groups that we can get into, but these are the 2 that we're talking about today. The left, obviously, because they're in the news again for their murderous behavior, and Islam because, well, that's kind of my field, and I'm trying to show you and connect the dots between all of these. Okay. So I'm going to close it now, and we'll take some super chats, possibly comments if there's time. But so in closing, all right, what I suggest is, for clarity's sake, you move away from this left-right paradigm. You still have to talk about it. You still have to use it. It's part of the political dimension. But you need to understand: is this thing that we're debating really belong on a political spectrum? Is it really something open to debate, or is this a truism? And by actually allowing myself to put it on that spectrum, I've just basically abnegated the truth and said, no, it's not a truism. Because if it's a truism, it does not belong on any political spectrum. It's not something you should be debating. Okay. And I'm giving you the most obvious example I've been talking about, of course, is the whole man saying I'm a woman. Okay. That's this person. Again, you either need a priest or a physician, a psychiatrist. That's it. And anything more than that is you're enabling this person. You're really hurting this person because they need help. They really need help. But instead, you're patting them on the back. You're telling them we need to celebrate this, and we have a whole month celebrating it just for this kind of behavior, when they actually should be kind of helped in another way. And worst of all, you're letting it permeate society. Okay. So what we're seeing right now, the guy that killed Charlie Kirk, and again, like I told you, this is the tip of the iceberg. We know this story because Charlie Kirk was a famous, important man. Okay. It could have been a no-name who was shot by some lefty maniac, and you probably wouldn't have heard about it. Okay. It just wouldn't even make the news. So this sort of thing is going on. These people who, this unchecked evil and insanity. Okay. Again, you want to look at it from a religious point of view, it's evil. You want to look at it from a secular point of view, it's insanity. But it's allowed to proliferate and to masquerade under the guise of a different opinion. Okay. That's what killed Charlie Kirk. That's what's killing a lot of people. That's what's not going away. That's what's destroying the West. Okay. And sane people, on the ultra right, are starting to find out we're really surrounded by this sort of insanity, a lot more than you think. We all saw all these people celebrating the death of the murder of Charlie Kirk. But guess what? For every one of the guy or gal who made a video boasting about this, there's probably millions who feel the same way, but they're not stupid enough to actually go on record and expose themselves, right? So that's definitely a big thing to keep in mind. This is going on. It's not going to leave. It's not going to go anywhere. It's all around us. And those celebrating and exposing themselves are just the tip of the iceberg, okay? Because, the final thing I'm going to tell you is the same exact elements that since the 60s have been preaching about tolerance for themselves and their ways and whatever about them, okay, which goes against nature, goes against reality, goes against God, goes against biology, okay? All those people and those elements who've been asking for this and they rely on your goodness, okay? Oh, come on, just let me be tolerant of my ways, right? I'm telling you now, those elements, if and when they are in total power, don't expect any tolerance from them, okay? Once these elements are in full, complete control, it's going to get pretty bad, okay? Think Charlie Kirk, but on an exponential level, all right? Because for them, tolerance and all these nice, fluffy, euphemistic words that they have used is just a vehicle. It's a means to an end, okay? And the end is to validate themselves, legitimize themselves, and get the power they need. And once it is uncontested, you're vermin, okay? We're not going to give you tolerance, all right? Keep that in mind, because that is, if you want to talk about truisms, that's one of the greatest right now. All right. I've had enough. So let's take some super chats. I hope that was edifying for you. All right. Okay. Hey, Raymond, can you prove you exist for us? Yeah. Can't you see me? Thanks, E. Alphonse. Raymond, thank you for your work. I have learned so much by listening to you. Blessing always. Thank you. I appreciate that. Happy to hear that. Pray to God your channel gets massive. Yeah, that'd be nice. Okay. As a war historian, the war starts before the battle with propaganda and lies and even implanted beliefs. Are you seeing this? Are you seeing this now upon us? Well, yeah, that's what I've been talking about. I've been seeing this for decades. Yeah, it's an ideological war. It's a war of subversion. This is what's going on. You subvert people's brains and make them destroy themselves. You want to destroy the West, you go into the people's. Look, historically, if you want to defeat a people, it was you go and beat them physically through war. Okay, so Islam and the West and what I write about, Islam had to go through violence and force. No one was going to open their door, and they had to fight and kill and win or get beaten, which it often did, both. Okay. Another way, if you're not physically strong, is by subverting. If you can't outnumber your enemy, or you can't beat them militarily, well, then you have to beat them internally, right? And that means you subvert their mind and get them to enable whatever it is you want, or to basically kill and destroy themselves. And so that's why when I tell you what I'm telling you about the 60s and all these lies, the sexual revolution, which was always presented under euphemisms. These are good things. This is what we should embrace. What are you, a bigot? Don't you want to be enlightened and elevated? Don't you want to be progressive? Okay, that was the lie. That was the vehicle to make your unsuspecting person fall for it. Okay, but all of those were subversive and meant to actually create insanity. Look around us. I never thought I'd live to see a day where we're seriously talking about men and women saying we are the opposite sex. And worse, you're the bad guy if you actually if you don't employ the lie and lie along with me. You want to talk about subversion. That's what's been going on. So this is a self-destruction from the inside. Okay. That's it. And people need to see this. None of these ideas are good. None of these ideas make people happy. The people who are on the left are miserable. They don't know that. They can't understand it. And they go further in the left thinking that's going to make them happy. This is what I meant about sin. The rules, the divine law, the natural order, following that is what makes you a happy, fulfilled person. If you say no to that, that's not why God's not going to punish you because, you broke an arbitrary law. No, you broke a very important law. Now you're in hell based on your own experience, based on you rejecting and failing to align yourself with the truth. Former Israeli American here. Thank you for doing what you do. I really appreciate your work. I wish all college-age Americans watch your content. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sam Harris is still good on Islam. You game? Game for what? I'm always game. Game for something with Sam Harris? Sure. The biggest hurdle is the fact that the wickedness owns the media, education, and the deep state. How do the normal people overcome these obstacles? Yep, that's exactly it. All the current, molders of our mind, of our epistemology, the people who say what we can and can't think. And this goes back to this fake political spectrum. They want you to think left and right, and ultra right is kind of weird, and ultra left is, it's a little weird, but they're still legitimate. No, ultra right is just normal people, and everything left of them becomes more and more compromised. Okay, until you reach full on lunacy, which is what ultra left is. And the entire media, including the so-called conservative media, that's the language and the paradigm they employ. Okay, whether that's intentional or not, it's definitely not helping. That's part of the confusion. And that's why the bottom line is we've legitimized lies and insanity. Okay. And we teach children this, and they grow up with these ideas, and you expect what? You don't expect what's happening. You don't expect people to just randomly kill people. I expect a whole lot more. This is just the beginning. Buckle in, because this is a society that's going into full insane mode. And nothing's being done to check it. It's happening in the grade schools. It's happening in the media, any movie you watch. It's happening from the newsrooms and the language they use that again conditions you and makes you inadvertently accept things as if they are legitimate. Okay, so it's coming from everywhere, and it's definitely a problem. And I guess the first step is to acknowledge that, normal ultra-right people need to understand that all these forces are against you. They're not out, and don't expose your kids, most importantly, to them. To leave a little child, like so many parents do, in front of the TV or with their phones or whatever, that's just, that's a disaster waiting to happen. If a friend is becoming more leftist, for a woman, what does that mean? That's a fragment, my friend. I can't answer that. All right, I'll leave it there. All right. Okay, we just saw that. Hey, brother, Sheikh Google has told me the Green-Red Alliance is an alt-right conspiracy theory, but in history, we know that the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Well, yeah, of course. Google is part of what I just talked about, right? It's part of the media. It's part of that whole complex that wants you to believe in lies and falsehoods, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I do think that the way I described it makes more sense. I think people fall for the confusion is, the left, well, they're liberal and, they believe in sexual promiscuity, etc. And Islam is conservative and patriarchal. So how can they be allied? Well, I just showed you. Don't get caught up in that sort of thing. That's just incidental stuff. The core is that they both represent falsehoods and they can't handle debates because they won't win a debate. Therefore, they both lash out with violence. On the same day Kirk was killed by a leftist, a Christian Iraqi in France was also stabbed to death because he's a Christian speaking his mind, and Muslims can't debate him, so they'll just kill him. Okay, that's become very, very common. One of those things to keep expecting. Is roid head offensive? If not, is that a motorcycle? All right, I don't know. Roid head. Is that a reference to steroids? Are you saying I'm on steroids? Okay, well, thanks for the compliment. Let's see. Do you think the left in general have any idea what Islam is about? Thanks for your work. Well, it depends how far left you go, right? As you've seen, to me, if you're centrist left, you're not totally sipping the Kool-Aid, as it were. But if you're really far left, yeah, that's why actually when you look at the leftists who most support Muslims, they tend to be the extreme leftist. And, one of my favorite anecdotes is, I think it was in Hamtramck. It's this word that needs a vowel somewhere. And it's kind of like the leftist, the far left city council, which was composed of mostly homosexuals, apparently, or effeminate men and masculine women, whatever, sexually confused people, were the first to help support Muslims. And now that the city council is a majority Muslim, the first thing they did, the Muslim city council, is get rid of pride, get rid of all the, pride flag and sexual celebrations in that city. Okay, so here again, it's a reminder they're not allies. They're just, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Okay, their real enemy is this sort of Christian civilization and the truths that are built upon it. And so that's why both of them will tolerate each other in as much as they need to, and use each other. So in the war college and my experiences, it was Muslim organizations like CARE who were attacking me, but they also, their leftist allies joined them, right? And even though technically, what do they care? I'm talking about Islam. But as it's a way to, take out the truth. So have you heard Sad's comp of the cricket brainworm? No, I don't know what you're talking about. But thanks. Keep up the great work. I've learned so much from your talks. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad to hear that. Separate into conservative Christian country. Separate into a conservative. Oh, maybe like you mean break into a conservative Christian country? Yeah, well, that's what a lot of people are doing, right? They're fleeing and creating their own enclaves in other states, and they're leaving, the states that are most problematic. Yeah, I mean, that's one thing you can do, but to me, it's kind of weak. You're giving up. You're giving up ground. You've actually surrendered. I mean, I get the impulse, especially if you have kids. You don't want to live around it. I just want to get out. I want to. I don't want to deal with this. It's not my problem. It's too big for me to handle. I get it. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but I don't know the reality of it and how it would unfold. In a way, it's a sort of, like I said, surrender, and you're literally giving ground. I mean, if everyone keeps doing this, I don't know. It's some northern west state, maybe, or two or three, and then what? You'll be surrounded by the left. That's when they'll come and get you. They'll know exactly where you're at. It's probably better to stand up and make a manly stand now. And again, what I'm saying, none of this has to do with war or violence. I'm talking about words, right? I'm talking about the words we use and the way we think, right? And I think they've intentionally been subverted, okay? Because that's how you defeat your stronger enemy. You make him defeat himself. So you start poisoning the way he thinks, making him use loaded words that are full of euphemisms, etc. And so I think if we can start fixing all that and having clear thinking and understanding that so much of what we call the left, it doesn't belong on a political spectrum because it's just wrong. Okay. Political spectrum existed for fiscal conservatives and fiscal liberals, right? That's what it was about for decades. No one had, I told you, right before the 60s, the most liberal Democrat would have been aghast at what's happening right now. They would have been aghast at just regular homosexual, okay? Pete Buttigieg style, which is like now considered so cool, and conservatives and Christians love it. And it's, so yeah, something happened and a great change in the way we think. And I think the biggest mistake is just that we've turned our backs on true, absolute truths. And we just think that anything, it's all opinions. Everyone has their opinion. And the little video I played for you, a lot of most people liked it, but a lot of people, or a few people, really hated it. And I remember some of the comments were like, nothing is black and white. Nothing is, no, actually, there's a bunch of stuff that's black and white. And that's the point. And I know there's other things that aren't, and we can debate other things. I'm fine with that. But there are things that are black and white. So for the people who were commenting and saying that right there is a perfect reflection, those people, of the sort of brain rot going on. For someone to really be able to say nothing in this world is black and white, yeah, you've lost your mind. Sorry, okay? Because there are truisms, and there are things open to debate. But the problem is, by and large, they've gotten Americans to believe that everything belongs on a spectrum, everything is open to debate, and therefore nothing is true. That's the implication. Regular gay people only want to live their lives. You can disagree with them and leave them be. Trans people, on the other hand, require you to participate in their delusional nonsense. Not the same. Yeah, I disagree. Okay. First of all, my view is, yeah, if you want to live your life, I'm not here to say that if you're gay, I want to break into your house and stop what you're doing. I don't care. I believe in a sort of like, my whole thing with the and I'm not going to use the word gay because I'm going to use homosexual. I'm not one for euphemisms. My whole thing is, don't push it on me. Don't push it on society. Don't push it on children. All right. If you're homosexual, and yeah, you can have equal rights. You can live your life. You can do what you do. But I'm talking about the normalization of this. There's no need for that. You don't have to keep putting this in everyone's. So many of young people who think they're gay, it's because they've been indoctrinated into thinking they're gay. Had they never heard of that word or that lifestyle, they never would have even occurred to them. All right. So they are actually manufactured to become that. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. But the link between being a regular homosexual and a trans is, again, when you say homosexuality is okay, what have you just said? You've just said no to nature, because last I saw, penis kind of enters the vagina and life comes out of it. That's kind of how it's designed. I don't think it was made to enter into an anus, okay, and oftentimes lead to disease. So yeah, in and of itself, it's inherently goes against nature, right? And I don't want to hear about, oh, but there's animals that do this or whatever, okay? And once you say it is perfectly legitimate, it's just like heterosexuality, you've said there's no truth. And once you say that, then of course all the trans things has to fall in play. That's what I was saying. Once you open the door to that, and it may seem innocuous enough, it's just homosexuality. Okay, well, you've on what grounds can you now say that being a furry is wrong? Why? I'm a man who believes I should be copulating with men. Okay, well, I'm a man who believes I'm a woman. I'm a man who believes I'm a furry. What's the difference? Yeah, one leads to the other. And like I mentioned, to people before the sexual revolution, regular homosexuality was more shocking and disturbing and condemned, okay, by Democrats and Republicans, let's say in the 50s and before then the ultra right homophobes are attacking the trans. It was much more. Look into it. And there's a reason for that. All right. Jews have worked with Muslims before in the past in Spain and the Ottoman Empire. There are Jews who say Islam will be the broom that sweeps away Christian Europe. Yeah. Yeah, historically, definitely. A lot of times Jews did help Muslims. I mean, that's, you can't escape from that. As for the latter part about using Islam to sweep, yeah, I've come across people saying that. And it's not something I've really looked into, but maybe I should. The plus way. Thanks. Revisionist Muslims say the Romans revised history to include Christianity and make themselves Christians. I guess they forget to admit the part where they persecuted, killed them. Yeah, I've seen all kinds of crazy revisionist Islamic stuff above and beyond this. See, again, this is the problem. The people who are on the wrong side of history have to fabricate history. Okay, so that's why, for the longest time, my work with the Islam and history is to offer the corrective, bring it back to what it really was. And I also believe in the West, the way history is presented. You go to school and you know the narrative, right? Oh, evil, dark age Christians, and then enlightenment, and then progress and open-mindedness. That neat way of understanding it. Yeah, that's all set to that's sort of the precursor to bringing all these ideas. Oh, and then the final culmination is now we believe everything's wonderful and hunky-dory and everyone can do whatever they want and there's no truth, et cetera, et cetera. So even the history of Europe, I would argue, has been very much tampered with in a way that slants it so it's supportive of the left. I have a 12-verse Shia friend. Every time I try to argue, he says every source or argument I present is Sunni. Do you note any Shia sources? God bless. Well, yeah, I mean, that's of course what they say because they don't acknowledge the Sunni source and vice versa. It's going to be hard to argue with the Shia from their own sources because their sources validate them, just like it's hard to argue with the Sunni from his sources. Unless you talk about Al-Zut and that sort of thing. I couldn't resist. That's for all you Al-Zut fans, but all right. Thank you for the tireless work in these dark times, sir. How do we combat something like Qatari investment into education and media? This financial jihad from those the West still considers friendly. Yeah, that's another real thing. The first point, I guess, is the legality. Is it legal for them to even do that? And if it is, then obviously we have a problem with the law that allows, outside foreign agents to come and infiltrate the minds of Americans and basically it's, make them conform to whatever that foreign agent wants. So I think that's a good question, but I think it's more of a legal question, which I'm not a lawyer. Have we been on a downward slide since the Enlightenment? And is Charlie Kirk's murder us trying to prevent a further slide down to worse degeneracy? Yeah, I do believe it's been an ongoing downward slide. And again, the more you accept these certain beliefs, or rather, the more you believe there is no belief. I mean, this goes back to Nietzsche and nihilism, right? What was his whole thing? Nothing matters. No, there is no truth. The Uberman, right? The Superman builds himself and creates himself. The funny thing is, most of these people who are nihilists, they're not Ubermen. They're quite the mediocrities and they're misfits. Okay, so that's not even what Nietzsche had in mind, I don't think. But these are just people who are so confused because of what we've allowed society to teach in school and through the media and so forth. So it's been a downward spiral, and it's getting worse and worse. Like I said, if I always talk about the boiling frog analogy. I think it's very, very important. And it really describes America. So think back what I was telling you, which is this is just a historical fact. And I can even maybe I'll put up links in the description to this video. But I think PBS has all these videos of authorities, principals, teachers, police warning against homosexuality in very offensive tones. Okay. Things that would, you'd be called a homophobe for the words they use. Right. And this is 50s and 60s. It's in California. And they warn, and they have a video of a man, and he's just trying to help a little kid and give him a ride, but he's really a predator, et cetera, right? And so my question is, how did we go from that to now you literally have drag queens, which again, here's another one of these words. Why am I using the word queen to describe some savage human man, oftentimes fat and ugly, dressed as a prostitute, sitting and grooming a boy? You see the importance of proper language. When you put it like that, doesn't that kind of make a little more sense? Doesn't that make you a little recoil at the idea, as opposed to saying, "Oh, it's just a drag queen story hour." Oh, it sounds so fun. No, the reality is, look at the real words that I just used. This is a man who's a sexual predator, and he's dressed like a female prostitute. He looks like a clown, and he is sitting intentionally grooming a child. Okay. So how did we get from those videos where homosexuality was under attack officially to that? Okay. And I'll tell you how we didn't get there. We didn't get there by, going back to the boiling frog, by throwing the frog in the boiling water. The analogy supposedly is if you put a frog in boiling water, he's just going to jump out. But if you put him in normal water and turn on heat on slowly until it boils, he won't notice it and he'll die. I don't know if that's true or not. People say it's not real, but that's the analogy. So my point is, we didn't get to the trans madness by just taking people from where homosexuality was so bad and throwing them into a boil. That would have been a boiling pot saying, hey, trans stuff. But what happened is it was very slowly and imperceptibly, decade after decade, incrementally normalized, right? I remember growing up in the 80s, the most sympathetic, the funniest, the coolest character in all the sitcoms was the gay guy. Jack Tripper. He wasn't gay, but they made sure that he would act gay. Three's Company, right? He was a likable guy, and he'd act gay. And in order for the old fogies, the old-fashioned people you don't want to be like Mr. Roper and and Mr. Furley, so they can allow him to live, right? He had to act gay, and he was funny, but he was cool with it, with being gay. And I remember this other guy. I don't even remember the show, Monroe. Some guy living with Mr. Rush. What a flashback. Anyway, I just remember there was a barrage of always showing homosexuals as gay. Yeah, they wanted to fit the word gay, happy. They're always happy and joyous. I don't know why. What makes that person who engages in that behavior extra happy than me? I don't get it, but okay. And then it became acceptable, and all that was wanted, as one commenter said, is we just want to be accepted. Okay, and it became acceptable. Then the heat was turned on the boiling frog, right? A little more was required. It wasn't just that, right? And now the heat is on, and people are longing for the good old days when it was just regular homosexuality. That's great. It's been, now the heat's on to where we have this pronoun thing, this sexual confusion thing. We don't know what a man is or what a woman is, and you lose your job because you've misgendered someone. That was slow, incremental. We get you used to one thing, and by the time and then when we consolidate that, we introduce the next thing, the next weird thing, right? And that is the boiling frog analogy. So that's why the United States of America went from, in the 50s and all before then, vocally and vociferously condemning homosexuality, to now we have a whole month where we have to celebrate it and make sure all the kids celebrate and participate in it. Okay, it happened gradually, imperceptibly, and but very much by design and intentionally. Yeah. Arabs act like they aren't racist, but didn't they enslave blacks because they thought they were inferior? Do Arabs still view blacks as inferior? Yeah, Arabs are definitely racist, and they do generally, by and large, view blacks. I mean, the thing is, that's the irony. Everyone outside the West is racist. Look at India. They have a whole caste system, right? They're all one people, and they have a system based on skin color. And the lighter you are, the more noble you're considered. And the lower you are, you're like untouchable. So yeah, racism is sort of a natural thing, I think, that occurs in most people. At least not necessarily you're inferior to me, but sort of it's tribalism. People just favor their own race and their own ways. And, they outsiders are outsiders, except in the West, of course, as seen, where, everyone, all these crazy ultra-right people need to get in line and start, submitting everything, their country, their culture, their religion, and making sure everyone is better treated than they would be treated in their countries. Okay, I believe that is that. And how long have we been on? Oh, look at that. It's a new record for me, I think, for a single live stream. Okay, so there it is. To wrap it up, as I said, you need to move beyond the political spectrum thing and use it only as it's needed, okay, as in fiscal policy. But when we're talking about a lot of things that we do talk about, they don't belong on that line. And if they do, they belong in the way I tried to explain it to you, right? Which is the ultra right is just normal people who want what everyone else in this world outside the West want and expect out of their own nation. And the further left you go, the further you say bye-bye to truisms, whether they are scientific or biological, or yes, even religious. Okay. And when you're in the middle, well, now you're a nihilist because you don't believe in anything. Little left of the middle, and you start moving down the road of insanity until you're a full-blown radical leftist and you do what you do and you kill people like Charlie Kirk. And so may he rest in peace. And I will end it at that. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, farewell.